Great. It's a privilege for me to be here with you today as a part of this very stimulating day. I have just one message for us here today, and that is this, that a career in the world is a powerful place to live out our faith. My faith has not been compromised by my career in business. In fact, it's been strengthened by it. I would say that my career has really been the crucible for the formation of my soul. I've grown more through my career in business than any other aspect of my life. Not because it's easy, but often because it's so hard. But here's the genius of God's design that I'm beginning to discover, that He accomplishes His work in us and in the world simultaneously, and He does it through the ordinary experiences of our lives, including our work lives. Let me try to put this message in the context of my own career. I've spent nearly 30 years helping to build technology and communications companies. I'm kind of a glutton for high-octane challenges, I guess. I hadn't actually counted them up until I was preparing for our conversation here today. But I've done 3 startups, and I'm now on my 3rd turnaround. What that really means is I'm an old guy, and I've been doing this a long time. The startups range from a raw startup that was started in a tin shed in an alfalfa field in Colorado to another one where we raised $2.5 billion and hired 4,000 people in 2 years. I'm currently the number 2 executive at Vonage. How many Vonage customers do we have here? So we'll be selling them in the bookstore afterwards. As you may know, Vonage is an internet communications company, about $900 million in revenue, and it too is a turnaround. We're making good progress. We've gone from losing $50 million to making over $165 million this year, so that's a good thing. And the stock is down from its high, but still more than doubled from a year and a half ago, so we are making progress. I've spent about 2/3 of my career as a chief financial officer and the balance as a general manager, as a CEO, division president, president of a small company. So I've had both sides of the house. And in baseball terms, I would describe my track record this way. I've had a single, 2 triples, a long fly out, and a home run. And the ball's still in flight on the Vonage experience. We made good contact with the bat, but we'll see where that ends up. But I don't want to talk about success here today. I want to talk about surrender and the power of our emptiness. You know, at the Harvard Business School, there's a class called Control, which is not surprising. But there's not a class called Surrender. I've been in that latter school for the last 25 years or so, and that surrender has really been the centerpiece of my own faith journey. I'm discovering that as we submit to God's will for our lives, His Word is made flesh in us, that we are literally reprogrammed. We are rewired to conform to His design. It's not always easy. Certainly in my case, it hasn't always been pretty. But that is really the work that He wants to do in our lives as He goes about doing work through us in this world that He loves so much. So let me offer you 2 examples of how God has worked in my life. First is I will describe for you kind of the transformed perspective of work that has grown in me from the early days of my career. And secondly, I'll talk about how God's Word has been made flesh in me through the power of pain. I'll talk about the long fly out that I described, because I think sometimes we learn more from our failures, and we certainly learn more from each other in that context. I came to an authentic faith out of a crisis of meaning in work. At least I thought it was a crisis of meaning in work. It was really a question of purpose in life. And God had to answer the question of why am I alive and what is our purpose in life in order to provide a context for answering the question about meaning in work. For me, I ultimately concluded that the purpose of my life was to live for God instead of for myself. But even after coming to that understanding, I couldn't make the connection between what I was doing in this moment and my purpose in life. I had it so wrong for so long that God had to walk me through what I would describe as a succession of paradigm shifts. For me, God has been both a psychiatrist and a cardiologist. Mostly I have mental problems and problems of the heart, so He tends to do a lot of work in me in both those areas. A lot of this were mental problems. I was thinking about work wrong. The central paradigm shift that He worked in me was that I was trying to derive meaning from my work instead of bringing meaning to the work. I thought, you know, if I just get the right job, I'll be happy. Somehow I will be filled up. But came to understand that that was not the case. I would never be happy in any job that I took because the source of unhappiness was not outside of me, it was within me. And it was the perspective that I brought to my work that would bring life to it. And so it was incumbent on us and on me to just articulate a life-giving perspective of my job. That's not that easy in business, you know. There are a lot of life-draining perspectives of business about making money, and at the time I was the CFO of a publicly traded company. I was 35 years old. We had about 2,500 employees. I was trying to understand these things, but couldn't. But over time, as God worked that in me, he began to give me what has become a working job definition for me, and that is to contribute to a better society as seen through the eyes of God. And in that same context, I began to think about work in a similar way, that I've now come to see that the purpose of business is to serve. It's to serve society also. There are many ways that business serves society. Let me offer just 4, and I'll describe them briefly. First is responsible value creation. Have you ever thought about the fact that business is the only thing that creates value and everything else distributes it? And we're involved with the working with the poor in Honduras, and you only have to get off the airplane in Tegucigalpa or San Pedro Sula and say there's something different about this place, and it's GDP per capita. And I'm not saying that money is the solution to the world's problems, but clearly economic value is a hallmark of a well-functioning society, and business has a role in creating economic value so that it can be used for the purposes of God that Richard just described for us. So responsible value creation. The second way business serves is by serving customers, by delivering on our promises to the customers every day. I spend time at Vonage listening to customer care calls, and it warms my heart to see that we're helping people save money and getting their service connected and seeing how it's really, in a very small way, contributing to their lives. I think we worship a very relevant God, and that he does care about those things. So responsible value creation, serving customers. Thirdly, creating an environment for employees that enables them to grow into the full expression of themselves. Isn't that a manifestation of who we are and how we're made in God's image, that we are made for that expression of who he's made us to be? And in fact, I would connect those things by saying the very most important thing we can do to create an environment for employees is to make the company successful. I work very, very hard at trying to turn around Vonage, and if you talk to people, they wouldn't hear me saying these kinds of words. They'd be hearing me focused on how do we drive more value, since I'm the CFO and the Chief Administrative Officer. But my reason for creating value is that by making the company successful, it will create jobs that are meaningful to people and enable them to work in a company that is going places. The fourth way is of being a valued corporate citizen. At Vonage, again, we offered free calling to Haiti after the earthquake. We did the same thing in Japan after the tsunami hit. Small things, but really opportunities for us to be a valued corporate citizen. These are not academic considerations for me. I can tell you that I would have bailed on my business career a long time ago if God hadn't transformed my perspective of work. That my work has now gone from being ordinary to sacred. That in my better moments, I can make a connection between what I'm doing here and to see how God is at work in my work. There's now intrinsic value in what I do every day. There's no so that. So for me, I'm not working so that I can make a pile of money and give it away, or so that I can one day retire and then do something that is really valuable. God is now beginning to show me how every moment can be on purpose if lived for him in this context. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a glimpse into that genius of God's design, that how I was transformed as he was using me to transform society as seen through his eyes. We get to be co-creators with him in this world that he cares so deeply about. So how is his word made flesh in us? Let me describe that by talking a little bit about this long fly out that I alluded to in our baseball success or lack of success story. I got into the telecom business in 2000. For those of you who remember, that was the height of telecom at the turn of the millennium. And yes, we wrote it up and we wrote it down. This was the company where we raised $2.5 billion. We had won the license to compete with the phone company in Brazil. And we hired 4,000 people in 2 years to execute on that business plan. The company took off like a rocket. We put on 500,000 customers in the first 10 months. It was the fastest growing local exchange carrier in the world at the time. But then, as you know, sometimes startups turn into turnarounds, right? And that's what happened here. I got recruited by the shareholders to move to Brazil to be the CEO. My wife's only requirement was that I have a bodyguard and a bulletproof car. And I did. So I rode around with Marcio Buszewski, my Brazilian bodyguard. He would drive me to work every day, and I was involved with trying to turn this company around. When I got there, things were much worse than I had imagined. One of the investors decided not to fund the next tranche of capital, which was $100 million, left a modest hole, you might say, in the business plan. The capital markets crashed, and about 200,000 of those customers, it turned out, couldn't pay their bills. So we ultimately sold the company, but in that context, I got to tell you, sold is a four-letter word. And the investors got pennies on the dollar, including us, who had invested a lot of our own money in the company. But as painful as that business failure was, it paled in comparison to the spiritual angst that was being wrought within me. My coming to faith really turned on Jesus' call when he said, "Any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple." I thought I had surrendered everything to him, and now after moving to Brazil, giving up so much, I was saying, "Lord, what do I have left to give?" I'm digging dirt at this point. I had submitted myself to the heat of the kitchen, and you know what God wanted to do is he wanted to boil up those impurities in me through the intensity of that experience. What he began to show me was that I had made achievement my God, that he wanted me to give up my attachment to the shiny objects of this world, that being one of the most powerful that had a hold over me. See, I had become a wind-up toy for achievement. Just wind me up and I'll go. And it wasn't until the achievement went away that I realized that I had made it my God. But then a strange thing happened. After coming through the pain of that experience, I found myself in a place of freedom that I had never experienced before. Freedom from being a slave to the God of achievement that I didn't even know had a hold over me. Free at last, in the words of Martin Luther King. And that then I began to get a taste of other words of Jesus when he said, "I have come to set the captives free." That's what he wants to do. So I've hoped to give you just a little glimpse into why I feel so strongly that our careers are a wonderful place to live out our faith. Not because it's easy, but because it's hard. And my career has truly been shaped by this crucible of our careers. It's a place where God transforms us so that we can transform the world as co-creators with him. I would tell you that I've had the privilege of traveling to 41 countries through my international business career and personal travel, and that the adventure of that travel pales in the comparison to following Jesus into the world that he has promised us. So I just encourage you on the adventure, and thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.